The rain had not just fallen over Larkspur, Texas. It had settled in like a bad mood that refused to lift. For 3 straight days, gray clouds hunched low over the flat horizon, blurring the line where the cotton fields met the highway, turning the dirt lots outside town into shallow lakes of brown water. On the main drag, neon signs from the diner and the liquor store shimmered faintly in puddles, their reflections wobbling each time a truck rolled by. Inside WKLR 98.3, the only country station still broadcasting within 50 miles, the world felt suspended in a different kind of storm. The on-air studio was a rectangular room with no windows, paneled in fading acoustic foam that had once been navy blue but had long since faded to a dull, dusty gray. A large analog clock hung above the soundboard, its red second hand ticking in precise, indifferent sweeps. The desk was scarred with small scratches from decades of coffee mugs, scribbled playlists, and the occasional frustrated fist. Walter Callahan sat at the console, elbows resting on the edge, staring at the blinking red on-air indicator as if it could answer questions he hadn't even fully formed. He was 61, but the last few years had carved deeper lines into his face than the previous 10 combined. His dark hair, once thick and stubborn, had thinned and gone silver at the temples. His hands were wide and rough, knuckles marked with old scars from odd jobs he'd taken in his 20s before radio had finally given him something that felt like purpose. The studio smelled like it always had: stale coffee, old carpet, dust, and the faint metallic tong of overheated equipment. Walter took comfort in that smell. It was one of the few things in his life that hadn't changed. On the shelf above the console sat 3 framed photographs. The first was of a much younger Walter, maybe 29, with a full head of hair and a reckless grin, standing in front of the WKLR logo the year he'd first gone on air. The second was of his daughter, Diane, at around age 7, wearing oversized headphones and grinning at the microphone as if she'd just been handed the keys to a kingdom. The third was a black and white picture of his father, Earl Callahan, standing in front of the now demolished Larkspur Cotton Gin in the late 70s, arms crossed, jaw hard, pride and worry fighting for space in his eyes. Walter's gaze lingered on that last photo. His father had lost his job when the Cotton Gin closed in 1989. Walter remembered the way the town had gone quiet, how men who'd been loud and confident at the bar suddenly spoke in hushed tones about maybe heading to Houston, or trying their luck out near Dallas. He'd started the Heartland Hour partly because of that, because back then, nobody seemed interested in hearing the stories of people whose lives had been uprooted by decisions made far away. The clock above the board read 6:47 a.m., 13 minutes until the Heartland Hour went live. 13 minutes until he was supposed to announce that the show, his life's work, was being canceled by people who had never once set foot in Larkspur. He glanced at the printed email lying on the desk, the paper slightly crumpled where his fingers had dug into it overnight. From Richard Ellsworth, subject: programming change, WKLR time, 11:52 p.m. Walter. Effective immediately, the Heartland Hour segment will be discontinued in favor of syndicated content. This decision reflects our commitment to modernizing our audience engagement strategy in alignment with Vantage Media Group's broader portfolio. Please transition existing listeners to the new programming block by Friday. Regards, Richard. 3 sentences. 30 years boiled down to corporate language that didn't even bother to say thank you. He'd read the email on his phone at the kitchen table the night before, the glow of the screen the only light in the house. Nancy had already gone up to bed. The house had been quiet except for the refrigerator's low hum and the soft patter of rain against the back door. Walter had sat there for almost an hour without moving, staring at the words, knowing that when the sun rose, they would still be true. He rubbed a hand over his face now, rough stubble scratching his palm. His coffee sat half-finished beside the board, lukewarm. He took a sip anyway. It tasted like cardboard and regret. What am I supposed to tell him? He thought. How do you say this is the last time we'll do this to people who built their mornings, their grief, their hope, around that hour? He remembered voices over the years. Morning, Walt, can you play that old Alan Jackson song for my husband? He just got laid off and he needs something to hold on to. Walter, my boy, shipped out last week. Could you say his name on the air so he knows we're all thinking about him if he's listening from base? Hey, Callahan, my dad used to listen to your show every day before he passed. Would you play that George Strait track he loved for him? He'd never thought of the Heartland Hour as a product. To him, it was a promise. The studio door creaked open. Rain-heavy air drifted in with Diane Callahan as she stepped inside, shaking droplets from her jacket. Her boots left wet, dark crescents across the worn linoleum. She pushed damp hair off her forehead, a few strands escaping the ponytail at the nape of her neck. Place still smells like bad coffee and old cigarette ghosts, she said, dropping into the rolling chair across from him. They banned smoking in here 18 years ago, Walter replied, managing half a smile. But I guess some things never really leave, even when you tell him to. Like you, she said lightly, but there was a fondness threaded through the sarcasm. Diane was 34 now, but in some ways, Walter still saw the little girl who used to sit cross-legged in that same chair, spinning herself around until he barked at her to stop before she knocked over a mic stand. She had his eyes, a deep brown that turned almost black when she was angry, and her mother's jaw set firm when she'd made up her mind. She wore a faded hoodie from a local community college, oil stains on the sleeves from the fabrication line. You look like hell, she said, studying his face more closely. Good morning to you too, Walter answered. She leaned back, crossing her arms. Seriously, Dad, did you sleep at all? Walter hesitated. Couple hours. She glanced at the crumpled paper on the desk. That about the new owners again? Walter's thumb slid over the edge of the email, then moved away. Something like that. He didn't want to talk about the email. Not yet. There were too many endings stacked on top of each other in his mind, the shows, the plants, possibly his own career, and he wasn't ready to start pulling at any single thread for fear. The whole thing would unravel right there in front of his daughter. You on your way home? He asked instead. How was the shift? Diane blew out a breath. Long, noisy, smelled like grease and hot metal, same as always. She tried to make it sound casual, but Walter heard the tension under it. He'd learned to listen between the words with callers over the years. That same skill worked with his daughter, whether she liked it or not. Anything different? He asked. New orders, schedule changes, rumors. She hesitated for just a fraction of a second, which told him enough. They called another meeting for the end of shift today, she said. Whole plant, mandatory. People are guessing what it's about. And what are people guessing? Walter asked. She gave a humorless little laugh. Depends who you ask. Some say they're bringing in new machines. Some say they're cutting a line. Some say it's nothing, and Corpera just wants to give us another safety lecture. And what do you think? I think Denise from HR was crying in the parking lot when I got there last night, Diane said quietly. And I think she's not the type to cry over an updated PowerPoint. A small knot formed just under Walter's ribs. You talked to her? He asked. She left in a hurry when she saw people were noticing. Diane shrugged, but her jaw had tightened. Whatever it is, they'll tell us when they feel like it. That's how it works, right? They make decisions up top. We find out after it's already done. Walter felt the words like a physical shove because that was exactly what had just happened to him with Ellsworth's email. He glanced at the clock. 6:51 a.m. 9 minutes. Eat anything? He asked, trying to sound normal. Couple of vending machine pretzels at 3 a.m., Diane said. You still got granola bars in that drawer. Maybe. Those things might be older than some of our interns. Then it matches the furniture. She pulled open the drawer, found an unopened bar, inspected the date, made a face, and unwrapped it anyway. If this kills me, tell Nancy it was your fault. If that kills you, we got bigger problems than blame, Walter said. Diane took a bite and chewed slowly, studying her father. You seemed off. Up at 4, Walter said. Storm woke me up. It stormed all night. You usually sleep through it. She tilted her head, watching him the way she used to watch him soundcheck bands that came in. Something going on with the show? There it was. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. The words, "They're canceling the Heartland Hour," floated to the top of his throat and then sank again like stones. Just some changes, he said vaguely. New ownership means new ideas. She snorted. New ideas always mean somebody gets screwed. Who is it this time, you? Before he could answer, his phone buzzed on the desk. He glanced down. An email notification lit the screen. Subject line, Larkspur Fabrication Plant. Internal memo, confidential, do not distribute. It had been forwarded by Harold Whitmore, his old friend from high school, who had worked in accounting at the plant for 15 years. Harold was the cautious type, a man who balanced his checkbook to the cent and still carried a physical planner. For him to forward something labeled "Do Not Distribute" meant he believed the people who needed to know wouldn't be told in time. Walter's pulse kicked. He tapped it open. The email was long, full of corporate phrases like strategic relocation, cost efficiencies, and global competitiveness. But the core message was stark and simple. The Larkspur fabrication plant would be shutting down operations. Production would be moved to a facility outside Monterrey, Mexico. The Larkspur location would cease operations in 8 weeks. All 312 positions at the plant would be eliminated. 312. His eyes went back to that number, again and again, as if it might shrink with each pass. 312 jobs, Diane's included. Families he knew by name, church folks, Little League coaches. The guy who always requested old George Jones songs on Friday mornings. The woman who had called in last Christmas to say the overtime at the plant was the only reason her kids would have presents under the tree. No severance details in the memo. No mention of retraining. Just, "We appreciate your service and wish you the best in your future endeavors." His throat felt dry. He became faintly aware of Diane's voice, distant, like it was coming from down a hallway. "Dad, you okay?" Walter's thumb hovered over the phone screen. Instinct screamed that he should show her the email immediately. Another instinct, older, wired into how the corporate world worked, warned him that sharing a confidential memo could have consequences. Harold could get fired. He could get sued. Diane could carry a weight she wasn't ready for with no immediate way to act on it. He locked the phone and set it face down on the console. "I'm fine," he said, the lie heavy in his mouth. "Just station stuff, Dad," Diane said slowly, narrowing her eyes. "You look like you just saw a ghost." He forced a small shrug. "Only ghost around here is the ghost of good country music." She didn't laugh. The clock ticked louder in his head. 6:54 a.m. 6 minutes. He thought about the first Heartland Hour again, how he'd sat in this same studio with older equipment and a younger body, trembling as he opened the mic to talk about the Cotton Gin closing. He'd played Merle Haggard's "If We Make It Through December" and then taken calls from people who could barely get words out between tears. That hour had felt like something holy. Not in a church way, but in a "we're not alone" way. "Do you remember the night the gin closed?" he asked suddenly. Diane blinked. "I was a kid. You were 9, he said. "You fell asleep on that couch right there while I was on air. I remember tucking my jacket over you so you wouldn't get cold." She softened slightly. "I remember you being gone a lot that week. I know," he thought. "I was, and you paid for it." The guilt pressed at him from 2 directions now. The job that had kept him from her when she was small, and the new secret sitting on his phone that was about to crash her adult life. "Dad," she said, more gently now, whatever that email said, "if it's about the station, or about me, or about this town, you don't have to carry it by yourself." He met her eyes and saw so much of his own frustration reflected back, at the plant, at the station, at years of slow, grinding disappointments in places like Larkspur. He opened his mouth. The studio's program start. Reminder chimed on the console, a soft digital beep that might as well have been a siren for the way it jolted him. 6:59 a.m. He had 60 seconds to decide how much of the truth he was going to put on air. "Showtime," he said quietly. Diane watched him, knowing that, look well, the shift from father to host, from Walter to Walt on the dial. "Okay," she said. "I'll be out of your way." She stood, dropping the granola wrapper in the trash, and paused in the doorway. "Whatever it is, don't wait too long to tell me," she said. "You made that mistake enough times already." Then she stepped into the hallway, closing the door softly behind her, leaving him alone with the hum of the equipment and the rain's fading tap on the roof. Walter slid on his headphones. He took a deep breath. His hand hovered over the fader that controlled his microphone. The red on-air light blinked on. "Good morning, Larkspur," he said, his voice filling the room, smoother than he felt. "This is Walter Callahan, and you're tuned in to the Heartland Hour here on Wickler 98.3, coming to you live from right here in town, where the coffee's strong, the roads are wet, and the stories are real." He paused just long enough to feel the space where he was supposed to say it. This is our last morning together. He couldn't do it, not today, not with that memo on his phone, not with his daughter walking into a plant that had already been given an expiration date she didn't know about. "So grab your mugs, sit tight," he continued, voice steady. "We've got an hour of songs and stories lined up this morning for the folks who keep this town running. Night shift, day shift, in-betweens, and everyone just trying to make it through another week." He hit the button to start the first track, a slow steel guitar-heavy number by Alan Jackson about small-town life. As the music filled the headphones, he leaned back, heart pounding against his ribs. For the first time since he'd sat down behind a microphone 30 years ago, Walter Callahan wasn't sure if he was doing the right thing by keeping quiet. He glanced at the phone on the console. The screen was dark, but he could feel the weight of that memo pulsing inside it, as real as any heartbeat. Outside, the rain finally began to ease, leaving the town of Larkspur under a sky that threatened to clear but hadn't committed yet, much like Walter himself, caught between telling the truth and surviving long enough to figure out how to tell it. He didn't know it yet, couldn't know it, but the 12 words he chose not to say that morning would echo through every choice he made in the weeks to come. By Thursday, the rain had finally pulled back from Larkspur, but it hadn't taken the heaviness with it. The clouds had thinned into a high, washed-out ceiling, and the streets steamed where the early sun hit leftover puddles. Trucks rolled slowly through town, splashing water onto the curb. Outside the diner, someone had dragged a broom across the sidewalk, pushing away damp leaves and stray receipts. The world looked a little brighter, but it felt like everyone was squinting, waiting for something else to fall. At WKLR, the gloom was of a different kind. The station sat in a squat, single-story brick building just off the highway, sandwiched between a tire shop and an abandoned video rental store whose faded sign still read, "New releases," over a sun-bleached picture of a movie that had come out 15 years earlier. The station's modest parking lot was cracked, grass pushing up through the asphalt. The WKLR logo, a chipped, weather-faded sign shaped like a guitar pick, hung slightly crooked beside the front door. Inside, the hallway smelled of floor cleaner and old paper. Faded posters from long-ago country concerts lined the walls. Reba, Alan Jackson, Garth, a younger George Strait smiling from beneath a hat that hadn't yet seen 4 decades of stages. Walter stood outside the door of the temporary office that had been given to the new regional director of programming, one Richard Ellsworth from Nashville. The office had once been a storage room. He remembered stacking boxes of unsold station t-shirts in there in the late 90s. Now the t-shirts were gone, and in their place sat a sleek glass desk, a pair of leather guest chairs that seemed absurdly expensive for a small-town station, and a computer that looked newer than anything else in the building. Walter smoothed his shirt with one hand, the other holding a printed folder. He wasn't entirely sure why he'd brought the folder. Habit, maybe. He used to bring rating reports to meetings like this, charting small victories over the years, a bump during harvest season when farmers had their radios on all day, a spike during a special tribute show. Today there were no charts. The folder was empty, a prop he hadn't had the heart to leave on his desk. He knocked once. "Come in," called a clipped voice from inside. Walter opened the door. Richard Ellsworth sat behind the glass desk, tapping at a laptop. He was mid-40s, though he dressed younger, slim-cut navy slacks, a white shirt with rolled sleeves and a thin black tie. His hair was carefully styled, each strand in place in a way that made Walter's own thinning hair feel even more stubbornly ordinary. There was a framed degree from some business school on the wall, along with a tasteful generic photo of a city skyline at night. "Walter," Ellsworth said without looking up right away. "Right on time. Have a seat." Walter sat in one of the leather chairs. It squeaked slightly as he shifted. Ellsworth finished typing, hit a key, and finally looked up. His smile was professional, not warm. "I understand you wanted to discuss the programming note I sent earlier this week," he said. "The one about the Heartland Hour." "That's one way to put it," Walter replied. "You cut the show I've been doing for 30 years in 3 sentences, Richard. I thought it warranted a face-to-face." Ellsworth folded his hands. "I appreciate your dedication, Walter. I do. I took the time to review some of your past segments. They're earnest, authentic. I can see why they matter to people here. But Vantage didn't acquire Wokler to keep doing things the way they've always been done," Ellsworth said. "We're standardizing programming across markets. Syndicated blocks give us more consistent listenership data, streamlined ad slots, easier cross-promotion. The numbers are clear. Stations that move to our syndicated morning content see a 31% increase in revenue from that slot within a year." "That's your business case," Walter said. "I get that, but my business has never been just numbers. It's been people." Ellsworth gave a faint smile that didn't reach his eyes. "People respond to what we give them. You'd be surprised how quickly audiences adapt to new content." "Not when the new content doesn't talk about them," Walter said, feeling his voice sharpen. "Your syndicated show out of Charlotte doesn't know Larkspur from Lubbock. It's pre-recorded, polished, generic. Nobody in that studio cares that Mrs. Rodriguez on County Road 7 lost her son last year and calls me every Thursday to request his favorite song. Nobody in Charlotte knows the smell of the plant when you drive past at midnight, or what it meant when the Cotton Gin closed. But this town knows. And I've tried to make sure they hear themselves reflected back." "You're romanticizing local radio," Ellsworth replied. "I respect it, but that era is ending. Content is national now. Regional nuance can be woven into social media, into targeted ads, into everything except the 1 hour a day when a voice from here talks to people from here," Walter cut in. "You might see that as an obsolete luxury. I see it as the only thing that's kept some folks from going under." Ellsworth's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I'm not here to debate the philosophy of radio," he said. "I'm here to implement a strategy I was hired to carry out. The decision on your segment wasn't personal. It is to the people who've built their lives around it," Walter said, "and it is to me." Across the room, the humming fluorescent lights buzzed faintly. Walter could hear the distant sound of a commercial playing from the studio speakers down the hall. "Let me cut to the chase," he continued. "You want the Heartland Hour gone. I can't stop that, not permanently. I'm not naive, but I'm asking for one thing, one final show. On my terms. A real send-off where we do what we've always done. Give people here a place to speak." Ellsworth leaned back, studying him. "Why?" he asked. "Why is one last show so important to you? If it's ending either way, what difference does a farewell make?" Walter thought of his father turning in his work badge at the Cotton Gin, of his first wife, Carol, hauling Diane to her car after one of his long nights at the station, hurt in every line of her body, of callers over the years who had phoned in, their lives falling apart, just to hear their own name and story acknowledged over the air. Because endings matter, Walter said. Because how you close something leaves a mark on people. If you rip it off like a band-aid, they remember the sting. If you take the time to say goodbye right, they remember that someone cared enough to do it well. Ellsworth's expression softened just a fraction. Then it hardened again. I don't have unilateral authority to grant that, he said. Corpude's given me KP is not sentimental exceptions. But, he tapped his pen on the desk, there may be room for compromise. One final broadcast. However, it will be subject to oversight. Define oversight, Walter said. You'll submit your segment outline 24 hours in advance, Ellsworth replied. No surprises. No unscripted rants about corporate greed, industrial closures, or vantageous ownership structure. We're not going to air anything that could be construed as defamatory or politically incendiary. Walter's mind snagged on two phrases, industrial closures and ownership structure. You've been looking into the plant, Ellsworth said quietly, reading his face. It wasn't a question. Walter said nothing. I've heard things, Ellsworth continued, about an internal memo, about someone from accounting sending it to you, about you digging into the plant's parent company. Somebody had to, Walter replied, because they certainly weren't being transparent with the people whose lives they're appending. Be very careful, Walter, Ellsworth said, his tone narrowing, like the temperature in the room had dropped a few degrees. You are not a journalist for a national outlet. You are an employee of a radio station owned by Vantage Media Group, leaking or amplifying confidential corporate information that affects 312 people in this town. Could expose you and the station to legal risk, Ellsworth finished sharply. You want to help those people? Don't make things worse by turning this into a legal circus that we can't control. Walter felt heat rise under his collar. You think the worst thing that can happen to them is a legal circus? They're about to lose their jobs, Richard. Their health insurance, their stability, their dignity. The worst thing that can happen to them is already happening. Ellsworth leaned forward, voice low. I'm trying to keep this station alive, he said. Vantage didn't have to keep Wooklar. They could have folded it into a larger market, cut half the staff, and piped in everything from Houston. The only reason we're still sitting in this building is because they believe there's just enough value to justify keeping a local presence. You want to put that at risk? Because that's what's on the line if you go rogue on air. Walter thought about the receptionist Carla, who'd been greeting people at WKLR for 20 years, about the part-time board op Jake working nights while putting himself through school, about the quiet engineer Dennis who knew every cable and switch in the building like his own veins. He also thought about Diane walking into the plant that afternoon for the big all-hands meeting, still believing she'd be tightening the same bolts 6 months from now. I'm not looking to blow up the station, Walter said, his voice quieter now. I'm trying to make sure this town doesn't get erased. You think one song, 1 hour changes that? Ellsworth asked. I think sometimes it does, Walter answered simply. They stared at each other. Finally, Ellsworth sighed, the sound of a man doing math in his head that had nothing to do with numbers. One show, he said. Saturday. Next week. You get 60 minutes. You submit your outline on Friday by noon. You do not mention unreleased financial information from the plant. You do not accuse Vantage or its partners of anything on air. You want to talk about community, resilience, memories, fine. But you do not turn my station into a platform for an anti-corporate soapbox. Walter's jaw worked. Every part of him rebelled at the idea of having to ask permission to tell the truth on his own show. But one sentence Ellsworth had said kept echoing. I'm trying to keep this station alive. Alive meant people still had jobs. Alive meant some future where he could maybe find new ways to reach people. Dead meant silence, and silence was the one thing Walter had spent his entire career fighting. One show, he repeated. My way as much as possible, but I understand your conditions. Good, Ellsworth said, though he didn't look triumphant, just relieved. I'll expect that outline. Walter stood up. For a second, he considered offering his hand, then he decided against it. As he reached the door, Ellsworth called after him, "And Walter?" He turned. "If anything from that confidential memo gets traced back to this station, to you, to anyone connected to you, Corpo will come down hard. Not just on you, on all of us." The implication hung there. Choose what you're willing to burn down. Walter nodded once. Message received. He stepped back into the hallway, the fluorescent lights brighter out here than they had seemed in the office. The distant sound of an upbeat, safe, corporate-approved country song floated from the studio. He walked slowly toward the on-air room, the empty folder still in his hand. That evening, the kitchen at home was lit by the warm, yellow light of the overhead fixture, scattering gentle shadows across the wooden table. Nancy sat with a stack of envelopes divided into neat piles: utilities, mortgage, medical, miscellaneous. Her reading glasses were perched on the bridge of her nose, and her gray hair was twisted into a loose bun. Walter loved this sight, the small domestic order of their life shared late on a weekday, even when it tightened his chest with guilt. He dropped his keys in the bowl by the door and hung his jacket on the back of his chair. "You're home later than usual," Nancy said, not looking up as she scribbled a note on the corner of a bill. "Meeting with Ellsworth," Walter said, pulling out the chair across from her. "Ah," she said, in a tone that translated roughly to "that explains the thundercloud hovering above your head." He sat down slowly. The chair creaked. "Well?" she asked. "He's killing the Heartland Hour," Walter said. "Next Saturday's the last one." Nancy finally looked up. Her eyes were soft, sad, but not surprised. "I thought that might be coming," she said quietly. "Ever since the sale went through, you've been waiting for that shoe to drop." "He says it's about streamlining and portfolio-wide strategy," Walter said. "He's not wrong about the ad numbers, probably, but he's wrong about what this show means to people." "I know," Nancy said. "And deep down, I think you knew this day would come eventually. You just hoped it would be on your own terms." He exhaled slowly. "He gave me one last show, with restrictions. I have to submit an outline, will you?" she asked. "I already said I would," he replied. He practically threatened to fire me if I didn't. Or worse, made it clear if I went off script, he'd use that as justification to cut more than just the show. Nancy watched him, then folded her hands on the table. "What about the plant?" she asked. He stared at her. "You heard something?" "Everyone's heard something," she said. "You can't stand in line at the grocery store without catching pieces of it. Somebody heard someone say corporate flew in. Somebody saw boxes of papers being hauled into the HR office. Someone else swears she saw men in suits walking the floor with clipboards. In a town this size, secrets leak before they're even fully formed." Walter's fingers tapped restlessly on the tabletop. "Harold sent me the memo," he said finally. "It's not rumors. They're closing it. 8 weeks. Moving production to Mexico." Nancy flinched slightly, just around the eyes. 8 weeks, she repeated. 312 jobs, he added. Diane's one of them. Silence sat with them at the table for a few seconds, heavy but familiar. The kind of silence that came when people who cared about each other ran out of easy words. "Have you told her?" Nancy asked. "No," Walter admitted. Her eyes sharpened. "How long have you known? Since Monday. It's Thursday." "I know." She sat back, crossing her arms slowly as if physically containing her frustration. "Walter," she said, "you can't sit on something like that and pretend you have the moral high ground with Ellsworth about telling people the truth." "I'm not pretending anything," he said, but the defensiveness in his voice betrayed him. I wanted to know more first. I wanted to see if there was any chance it wasn't final. If maybe there was a missing piece. I didn't want to hit her with something this big without any kind of, context, plan, hope." "You wanted to spare her pain a little longer," Nancy said gently. "Yes. Do you wish someone had spared your dad when the gin closed?" she asked. "Or do you think he was better off knowing as soon as possible and trying to figure out the next move?" Walter opened his mouth, closed it again. He remembered his father coming home that night with his lunch pail still full because he'd been too upset to eat. He remembered him sitting at the table in silence so long that Walter's mother had to say his name 3 times before he blinked. "He told us that same day," Walter said quietly. "Didn't have any answers, just said it was happening." "And would you have wanted him to wait a week, a month?" Nancy asked. "No," Walter said, the word heavier than it should have been. "There's your answer." He stared at the bills on the table. The power company logo. The insurance company logo. All the ways people's lives were tied to steady income they'd been told they could count on. "If I tell her now," he said, "there's nothing she can do that she couldn't do if I told her tomorrow or next Monday." "You don't know that," Nancy said. "People need time to grieve, to plan, to rage. Time is a kind of power, Walter. Keeping the information to yourself keeps the power with you." He winced. "That's what you're mad at Ellsworth and the plant for doing," she added, not unkindly. He rubbed his forehead. "You're saying I'm no better than them." "I'm saying you're human," Nancy replied. "You're scared. You don't want to see that look in her eyes. The one you saw when Carol left. The one you saw when she told you you'd missed another school play because the station needed you. You don't want to be the source of that pain again." He looked up sharply. "That's low. It's honest," she said softly. "I'm not blaming you. I'm asking you to see yourself clearly. The same way you've tried to see this town clearly all these years." He leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. "She barely forgave me for those years," he said. "Sometimes I'm not even sure she really has. We get along, we joke, we talk, but there's a break in there that never fully healed. And now I have to be the one to tell her she's about to lose everything she's built for herself these last 8 years at that plant." "You're not the one taking her job," Nancy said. "You're the one who loves her enough to be honest even when it hurts." He stared at the table for a long beat. Then he nodded, once. "You're right," he said. "I'll tell her in the morning, before her shift." Nancy's shoulders relaxed a fraction. "Good," she said. She paused. "What about the show? What about it? Are you going to use that last hour to talk about this? Really talk about it?" He let out a bitter little laugh. "Ellsworth practically put a muzzle on me. No mention of unreleased information and all that. If I go too far, he uses that as a reason to shut things down faster and maybe throw lawyers at me for dessert." "Would that stop you if you think saying something could help?" Nancy asked. Her voice held no judgment, just a calm question. "Help how?" Walter shot back. "I can't keep the plant open with a song. I can't stop Vantage from canceling my show with a monologue. I can't wave a microphone around and conjure jobs out of thin air." "No," Nancy said, "but you can make sure the story of what's happening here gets told. That what they're doing isn't buried under 15 press releases. You've always said that matters." He was quiet. "It does," he said finally. "But I don't want to drag this station down with me. There are people here who didn't sign up to be part of a crusade." Nancy reached across the table and covered his hand with hers. "Then be careful," she said. "Smart, strategic. But don't let them turn you into a voice that just reads ad copy and plays music. That's not who you are. Who am I then?" he asked, half tired, half truly wondering. She smiled faintly. "You're the man who stayed up until 3 in the morning once. Off the air, just talking on the phone with a listener whose husband had just died because she was too scared to be alone. You're the man who drove to someone's house on Christmas Eve because their radio was broken and they couldn't hear your show, and you brought them an old spare from the station. You're the man who, in this town, has been the closest thing some people have had to a public record of their lives." He swallowed. "That guy sounds heavier than I feel most days," he said. "Well, tough," Nancy replied with a small smile. "You're stuck being him." He laughed once quietly. Then the laughter faded and the weight of the coming morning settled back over him. He told Diane the next day in the plant parking lot. The fabrication plant loomed large at the edge of town, a long, low building of gray metal and brick. surrounded by a sprawl of asphalt where pickup trucks and sedans lined up in neat rows. The air smelled faintly of oil and hot metal even this early, a scent that had seeped into the town's clothes and hair for years. Diane pulled into the lot in her aging Chevy, parking near the chain-link fence that bordered the property. Walter was already there, leaning against his old blue Ford, hands in his jacket pockets. She cut the engine, frowned when she saw him, and stepped out, shutting the door with a solid thunk. "Everything okay?" she asked cautiously. "Is Nancy all right?" "She's fine," Walter said. "This is about you." "That's not reassuring," Diane said, trying to play it off with a thin joke. He tried to smile and failed. "Walk with me for a second." She hesitated, then fell into step beside him as they walked toward the far end of the lot, away from the cluster of employees heading inside for the shift change briefing. "What's going on?" she asked. He pulled his phone out, the familiar mnemone pulled up to the paragraph that mattered most. For a second, he saw Nancy's face in his mind, reminding him, time is a kind of power. He handed the phone to Diane. "I need you to read this," he said. Her brow furrowed as she took the phone. She scrolled. Her eyes moved back and forth, scanning the dense, formal text. At first, her expression was just concentration. Then it shifted. Her jaw tightened. Her eyes widened slightly. Color drained from her cheeks. She read it again. When she looked up, her voice was quieter, but sharper. "This is real?" "Harold forwarded it to me," Walter said softly. "He works in accounting." He was in the meeting where they drafted it. The words came out like she was reading them off a script, disconnected from their meaning, like her brain hadn't caught up to her mouth yet. "Diane, how long have you known?" She cut in, eyes locking onto his. "Since Monday," he said. "It's Friday," she replied. "I know." "Say the number out loud," she said. He blinked. "What?" "Say it," she insisted, her voice starting to tremble under the steel. "How many days?" He swallowed. Four days, she repeated. "You knew for 4 days and you didn't tell me." "I was trying to figure out how," he said. "I didn't want to just drop it on you without what?" she snapped. "Without a PowerPoint, a pamphlet, an inspirational quote? Hey honey, everything you've built your adult life on is about to vanish, but here's a playlist to ease the blow." He winced. "That's not fair." "You're right," she said bitterly. "What's fair is that my own father knew my job was being taken away and decided to sit on it for 4 days while he figured out what to say." People were starting to glance their way as they walked into the building, sensing something heated, but not quite close enough to hear. Diane lowered her voice slightly, but the anger didn't dim. "You always do this," she said. "You always hold information close and then act like you're the one carrying the burden alone." "I was trying to protect you," he insisted. "From what? Reality?" She shot back. "You think finding out today instead of Monday makes this easier? You robbed me of 4 days I could have spent, I don't know, processing, planning, at least starting to wrap my head around it." "I didn't have details," he said weakly. "No severance info, no retraining program, no." "I didn't need a spreadsheet," she said. "I needed a dad who trusts me enough to tell me the truth, even when it's ugly." The words hit harder than he was prepared for. "I do trust you," he said, but even to his own ears it sounded like a defense, not a conviction. "Do you?" she asked. "Because when I was a kid, every time something went wrong with you and Mom, you protected me from it by not showing up at the house, by working late instead, by turning our life into this story you told on the radio instead of something you dealt with in person." He felt the old guilt slam into him. "That's not what I was. You turned other people's pain into content," she continued, voice shaking now, not just with anger, but with something more fragile. "You sat in that studio and talked about the cotton gin workers and the farmers and the folks who lost their homes. You were a hero to them. Meanwhile, your own kid was at home eating dinner without you 3 nights a week because the show needed you, and now you're doing it again. You find out something catastrophic is coming for me, and your first instinct isn't to tell me, it's to, what, fold it into your next big broadcast?" He stared at her, stung. "That's not fair," he said again, but the words felt thin. Maybe not, she said, but it's how it feels. They stood in silence for several long seconds, the sounds of the parking lot filling the space between them, car doors slamming, faint shout of "hold the gate," the distant clang of something metal inside. "I didn't want to see that look on your face," he said quietly at last, "the one you have right now. I know that's not an excuse, but it's the truth." She looked away, blinking hard. "Yeah," she said, voice rough. "Well, that's my face, Dad, that's my life. You don't get to avoid it just because it hurts to look at." He nodded, throat tight. "I'm sorry," he said. "I know," she answered. "You always are." She handed the phone back to him, her fingers briefly touching his. There was still love in that touch. Deep, old, complicated. But there was distance too, reinforced by a new layer of disappointment. "I have to go in," she said, taking a small step backward. "They're probably going to tell us something official in there." "At least now I know what's coming, Diane," he said. "Please, save it," she replied, lifting a hand. "You want to help? Use your precious last show to do something that actually matters, not just some nostalgia trip. If you're going to have a microphone in front of your face while this town's getting gutted, then say something real. Otherwise, why bother?" She turned and walked toward the plant entrance, her shoulders stiff, her steps fast. Walter watched her go, the word "wait" lodged somewhere between his chest and his throat, unable to make it out. As the door closed behind her, he caught his own reflection in the glass, an aging man with tired eyes, holding a phone heavy with truths he'd waited too long to share. The sun had fully risen now, casting long shadows across the parking lot. They stretched out like lines drawn between past mistakes and the choices he still had time to make as a father, as a broadcaster, as a man who had made a career out of telling other people's stories but was only now realizing how badly he'd fumbled his own. The official announcement came the following Monday, but by then, nobody in Larkspur was truly surprised. At 7:30 a.m., the entire day shift at the Larkspur fabrication plant was herded into the big break room, a long rectangular space with buzzing vending machines against one wall, mismatched plastic tables, and a bulletin board cluttered with outdated safety posters and faded birthday announcements. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, giving everything a slightly sickly cast. Diane stood near the back, shoulder to shoulder with co-workers she'd shared jokes and greasy lunches with for 8 years. She could feel the tension in the room like static. Conversations were low and fast, half-formed sentences hanging in the air. "You think it's a cut or a closure? My cousin works over in Amarillo. Said their plant had a meeting like this last year and now it's a parking lot. I heard it's just a shift change, maybe weekend work. Corporate doesn't fly in from Dallas for a schedule change." At the front of the room, a portable projector hummed, casting the plant's logo onto a pulled-down screen. Beside it stood the plant manager, Kevin Ramsey, face pale and drawn, and a woman in a navy blazer whose name Diane didn't know, but instantly recognized as corporate. The air smelled like burnt coffee and machine oil. Someone coughed. Somewhere, a vending machine dropped a can with a hollow clunk. "Thank you all for coming in early," Kevin began, voice tight. "We know your time is valuable, so we'll get right to it." The woman from corporate stepped forward, hands folded neatly. "My name is Lisa Thornton," she said. "I'm here on behalf of Armitage Industrial Holdings, the parent company of this facility. We recognize that news like this is never easy to hear, and we want to be as transparent as possible about the changes ahead." Diane's stomach clenched. She already knew what was coming. Walter's phone screen, that memo, had burned it into her mind days earlier, but hearing it aloud in this room made it feel different, heavier, more permanent, like engraving on stone. After a comprehensive review of our global operations, Lisa continued, "The company has made the difficult decision to consolidate production and relocate manufacturing currently done here in Larkspur to a more cost-effective facility in Monterrey, Mexico." There it was, words dropping into the air like lead. Murmurs broke out around Diane. Someone swore under their breath. Someone else said too loudly, I knew it, and then covered their face with their hands. This facility will wind down operations over the next 8 weeks, Lisa went on, her voice smooth and practiced, like she'd said this many times before in other towns, other break rooms. We are committed to supporting you through this transition. There will be severance packages, details of which will be provided in individual meetings. We will also be partnering with local workforce development agencies to explore retraining opportunities where possible. Diane barely heard the rest, something about appreciation for years of service, something about global competitiveness and market realities. The words washed over her like static. All she could see was the whiteboard by the time clock where she'd once written 8 years this month. In dry erase marker under a cartoon of herself in a hard hat, drawn by one of her co-workers. 8 years. 8 years of double shifts, of sore shoulders, of coming home smelling like oil and metal, of building a life that, while not glamorous, had felt solid. Now it all had an end date. Around her, people's faces were going through the same sequence. Disbelief, anger, fear, calculation. How will I pay rent? What about my kids' school supplies? Can I find work at my age? Should we move? Where? How? Diane's eyes stung, but she forced herself to focus on the details. Severance, retraining, time frame. She clung to concrete words the way someone falling clings to whatever they can grab. Her father's voice echoed in her head from the parking lot. 312 jobs, yours included. The only reason she wasn't hearing this as a total blindside was because he'd shown her that memo, 4 days late, but earlier than anyone else. It was a bitter, tangled kind of gratitude. Across town at that exact moment, Walter sat in his kitchen with a yellow legal pad in front of him, and the morning news murmuring from a small TV on the counter. He'd watched Diane's taillights disappear down the street as she drove to the plant, the memory of their argument sharp in his chest. Use your precious last show to do something that actually matters. He'd heard her voice all night. It had nested in his thoughts, refusing to leave. Now he stared at the legal pad. At the top, in his blocky handwriting, he'd written, "Final Heartland Hour," outlined raft under it, 3 bullet points with nothing after them. He tapped the pen against the paper. He could fill the hour easily. He'd done it for 3 decades. He could line up old favorites, play calls from past shows, do a nostalgic farewell. People would cry. He'd cry. The town would mourn the loss of something familiar. And then Monday would come. And the plant would still be closing. And the same corporate forces canceling his show would still be profiting from both decisions. What good would a sentimental farewell do if it dodged the truth? He got up and poured another cup of coffee, listening absently as the TV anchors on the morning show discussed a national election poll, a celebrity divorce, a viral video of a dog skateboarding. None of it felt remotely connected to the world he lived in. He switched the TV off. The silence felt more honest. Walter sat back down, pen hovering over the pad. If you're going to have a microphone in front of your face while this town's getting gutted, then say something real. The problem wasn't that he didn't know what to say. The problem was that saying it could cost more than he was sure he was ready to lose. He could expose the connection between Vantage Media Group and Armitage Industrial Holdings, the financial overlap he'd found in that late-night online deep dive. It wasn't a hidden conspiracy. It was right there in public filings, if you knew where to look. The same private equity firm, Delacroix Capital Partners, had significant stakes in both. To Delacroix, Larkspur was not a town, it was a line item. But naming that on air, in a small station wholly owned by Vantage, was like walking onto the factory floor with a lit match and a gasoline can. He rubbed his temples. He tried to think about something else. Anything else. That was when his memory snagged on a fragment from years ago, one of those odd, sticky details that the mind keeps for no obvious reason, and then, suddenly, turns into something crucial. He was in his old office in 2004. Harlan Boyd, the station's veteran host who'd taken Walter under his wing when he started. had been sitting in the chair with a styrofoam cup of coffee, telling stories of his Nashville days. "They shelved a damn masterpiece once," Harlan had said, shaking his head. George Strait himself cut it. Ballad about a mill town in East Texas eaten alive when the plant shut down. Too damned honest, I guess. Label said it was off-brand. What happened to it? Walter had asked. "Sits in a vault somewhere, far as I know," Harlan had grunted. "Some of the best songs in this world are locked in closets so executives don't have to admit they know exactly what they're doing to people." Back then, Walter had filed it away under sad stories from the industry. Now, sitting at his kitchen table, with his own town about to be gutted by decisions made in boardrooms, the memory slammed back into him with an entirely new weight. A song about a mill town being destroyed by a closure, written and sung by George Strait. Locked away because it was too depressing, because it cut too close to the bone. He felt his pulse quicken. What if that song didn't have to stay in a vault? What if the last Heartland Hour wasn't just nostalgia, but the moment that song finally found an audience in a town that desperately needed to hear itself reflected? It was probably impossible. George Strait was a legend, a man whose career now spanned decades. You didn't just call him up and ask for an unreleased track, but Walter had spent 30 years learning a simple truth. Sometimes you knock on a door you have no right to expect will open, and it cracks anyway. He pulled his old contact notebook from the drawer, dog-eared, pages crinkled, numbers crossed out and scribbled again. Most station contacts were digital now, but Walter trusted paper. Paper didn't crash. Paper didn't lose your life's work with one bad update. He flipped through pages filled with names, local artists, PR reps, label interns, a handful of minor Nashville producers, and then he saw it. Colander, Robert, Nashville archive guy, Harlan old A&R, historian, worked 80 Slineys. Walter remembered Harlan had mentioned him once, a music historian type who collected outtakes and session notes, a man who still cared about songs that never saw the light of day. He dialed the number before he could talk himself out of it. The line rang 4 times. On the 5th ring, a voice answered, older, roughened by years of smoking or just time. "Yeah, Colander. Mr. Colander, my name's Walter Callahan," he began. "I run a country radio show down in Larkspur, Texas. We've never met, but I used to work with a guy named Harlan Boyd, and Harlan?" The man cut in. "That old crank's still alive?" "Last I heard," Walter said, surprised into a small laugh. "He retired to some lake in Arkansas. Still calls in to complain about bro country once a month." "Hell, that sounds like him," Kalenda said, a hint of fondness beneath the gruffness. "So what do you need, Walter, from Larkspur?" Walter took a breath. "I'm calling about an old story he told me," he said. "About a song George Strait cut in the late 80s. A ballad about a mill town closing. He said the label shelved it, called it too depressing. I was wondering if you knew anything about that." There was a pause. Walter could hear faint shuffling on the other end, like someone reaching for a memory on a crowded shelf. "You're talking about Quiet on Mill Street," Calendo said at last. The name sent a small thrill through Walter. It felt real now, not just a rumor. "That's it?" Walter asked. "That's the name?" "Yeah," Kalenia said. "George wrote it with a fella named Clay Merrill. Clay's dead now. Heart attack maybe 12 years back. They cut the track in 88, I want to say. Maybe early 89. I was in the damn control room when he sang it." "You were there," Walter repeated. He couldn't keep the awe out of his voice. "Yup," Galenda said. Sat behind the glass watching him do 2 takes. First one was good. Second one was something else. There's a point sometimes where a singer stops performing and starts bleeding. That second take bled all over the tape. What happened to it?" Walter asked softly, though he already knew the broad strokes. "The label happened," Calendar said. "We brought it into the A&R meeting, and the suits looked like we'd dropped a corpse on the table. Too bleak. Doesn't fit the arc of the record. Radio won't play a 5-minute dirge about plant closures, Bob. They were all about feel-good anthems and stuff you could blast at tailgate parties. No room for a story that ended with people losing their homes because some executive in New York wanted a bigger bonus. Walter felt his throat tighten in a way that had nothing to do with age. George fought for it, Calendar continued. Told them he'd written it for people he knew. Said it was some of the truest stuff he'd put on tape. They nodded, said all the right, we respect your artistry lines, and then quietly buried it. Cataloged, vaulted, filed away under never to be discussed again. And it's still there? In that vault? Walter asked. Far as I know, Calenda said. Master tapes in some climate-controlled basement in Nashville. Sitting between 100 other things that were too real for radio at the time. Walter's mind raced. Mr. Calendar, he said carefully. My town is about to lose its biggest employer. A plant closure, 312 jobs. A place people have built their lives around for decades. I host a show that's getting canceled in a week, a show that's always been about giving people here a place to be heard when the world stops listening. And I can't stop thinking about that song, sitting on a shelf, when it could be. He trailed off. When it could be exactly what folks like that need to hear, Calenda finished for him. Yes, Walter said. Calendar exhaled slowly. I'm not some gatekeeper wizard, he said. I can't just pop over to the label and grab a master tape like it's a carton of milk. Those days are gone, and even if I could, I don't own the rights. The label does. Plus George himself. He's always had more say than most. I understand, Walter said quickly. I'm not asking you to do anything illegal, but you said you were in that control room. You fought for it back then. You must have some connection still. Calendar was quiet for a moment. I don't have much pull with the label these days, he said slowly. Retired a while back. They trot me out for Christmas parties sometimes to tell stories about the old days so the kids in skinny jeans can pretend there was a golden era. But I do still talk to Gerald now and then. Gerald? Walter echoed. Gerald Whitcomb, Calendar said. Been George's manager since before you were probably out of tape decks. He's one of the few in this business who still has something like a conscience. If anyone can get that song out of the vault, even for one performance, it's him. And if anyone George might still listen to about when and where that song should be played, it's Gerald. Walter's heart kicked. Would you talk to him? He asked. Just pass along my story. Tell him what's happening here. If all he says is no, I can live with that. But I'll kick myself forever if I don't at least ask. You always this stubborn? Calendar asked, but there was a note of appreciation in it. Ask anyone in Larkspur, Walter said. Especially my daughter. Calendar snorted once. Then he grew serious again. All right, he said. Here's what I'm willing to do. You send me an email. Tell me, in plain language, what's happening in your town, what your show is, why this matters to you personally. No grand speeches, just the facts and the heart behind them. I'll forward it to Gerald with my own note. After that, it's out of my hands. That's more than I expected, Walter said. Thank you. Don't thank me yet, Calendar replied. Don't be surprised if the answer is this is too messy. We'll pass. George is a decent man, but he's also surrounded by people whose job is to protect him and his catalog from risk. You're asking them to step into a very specific local fight. I know, Walter said. But if that song was written for people like us, then maybe this is the fight it was made for. Calenda was silent for a few beats. Email address is on my website, he said. Use the subject line Quiet on Mill Street. I'll keep an eye out for it. They said goodbye. Walter hung up and sat there, phone in hand, staring at the legal pad again. The outline was still blank, but the space above it felt different now, less like a void, more like a field waiting for a storm. He sent the email 2 hours later. He wrote it in one long, unedited burst, the words pouring out faster than he could censor himself. He wrote about Larkspur, about the gin closing when he was young, about the plant now. 312 jobs, 8 weeks, no real alternatives in town. He wrote about the Heartland Hour, about callers whose lives had intersected his only through radio waves, but who felt like family anyway. He wrote about Diane, about how her job was on that chopping block, about how he'd failed her too many times and didn't want to fail her town now. He didn't romanticize it. He didn't dress it up. He just told the truth the way he'd always tried to on air. Then he hit send and immediately regretted at least 4 sentences. It didn't matter. The words were gone, racing towards someone else's inbox. The next 2 days passed in a kind of suspended tension. On Tuesday, he did the show as usual, the knowledge of the plant closure coloring everything he played, when a long-time caller, Erlene, phoned in to request Amarillo by morning for her husband's birthday. He heard a tightness in her voice he hadn't heard before. "You all right, Erlene?" he asked gently, on air. "We're hanging on," she said. "He works over at the plant. Trying not to panic yet. Figured we should at least have one good song today." He played it, his hand tightening around the fader. After the segment, Carla buzzed him from the front desk. "Some guy from Channel 6 called," she said. "Wants to know if the station has a statement about the plant closure." "We're a radio station, not a PR office," Walter said, tired. "Tell him we're just covering it like everybody else." "Thought you should know they're sniffing around," Carla replied. "Feels like something's building." He already knew. By Wednesday afternoon, local social media was filled with grainy photos from the plant meeting and impassioned posts about corporate betrayal and selling out the town. Someone had started a petition demanding that Armitage reconsider the closure. Someone else had posted a link to Armitage's quarterly earnings report, highlighting the executive bonuses line. At home that night, Walter found Nancy sitting on the couch scrolling through her phone, her face set. "Town's awake," she said. "They were never asleep," he replied. "They were just..." He stared at it for 1 ring, 2, 3. Then he answered. "This is Walter, Mr. Callahan," a smooth, controlled voice said. "This is Gerald Whitcomb. I manage George Strait. Robert Kalenda forwarded me your email." Walter sat down slowly. "Mr. Whitcomb," he said, "thank you for calling." "I wasn't sure. You weren't sure I would," Whitcomb finished. "I usually wouldn't. We get a lot of requests, most of them aren't what you'd call grounded." Walter swallowed. "And mine?" There was a pause on the line, long enough for Walter to hear faint office sounds in the background. A distant phone, a door closing, the rustle of paper. "Your email didn't sound like a man trying to score a scoop," Whitcomb said. "It sounded like a man trying not to drown." Walter exhaled shakily. "That's accurate. I read what you wrote," Whitcomb continued. "Then I looked up Larkspur, the plant, Armitage, and Vantage while I was at it. You're right, there's a web of connections there that don't look good, even if they're technically above board." "I'm not asking you to wade into a corporate fight," Walter said quickly. "I know that's not your world. You're asking about Quiet on Mill Street," Whitcomb interrupted gently. "I know. I was there when George wrote it. I was there when the label shelved it. I was there when he walked out of that meeting angrier than I'd ever seen him." Walter was quiet, listening. "He told me then," Whitcomb went on, "if they won't let me put it on a record, fine. But I'll know it's there. And if the day ever comes when some town really needs that song, maybe we find a way." I didn't think that day would actually arrive, or that if it did, anyone would have the guts to ask. "I don't know if it's guts or desperation," Walter said softly. "Often the same thing," Whitcomb replied. There was a second, softer line beep in Walter's ear, the sign of a call on hold, someone waiting on Whitcomb's end. Whitcomb ignored it. "I took your email to George," he said. "Read it to him, all of it." He sat there with his eyes closed the whole time. When I was done, he didn't say anything for a minute. Then he said, "Larkspur. That's close to where Clay grew up, isn't it?" I said, "Close enough." Walter's heart was pounding. "What did he say after that?" he asked. "One question," Whitcomb said. "He wanted to know why this mattered to you specifically. Not the town, you. I gave him what I thought, but I told him he should hear it from you. That's why I'm calling." Walter gripped the edge of the table. "It matters to me," he said slowly. because I've spent my whole adult life in front of a microphone trying to make sure people in towns like this don't disappear when bad things happen to them. Because my father lost his job when the gym closed, and no one outside a 20-mile radius cared, but a few songs on the radio helped people keep going. Because my daughter works at that plant, and I watched her grow up in the shadow of my job and my failures. And now I'm watching her world drop out from under her feet. He paused, struggling for words that weren't clumsy. Because, he went on, I've had 3 decades of folks calling me to share the hardest days of their lives, and I've tried my best to honor that. And now my own town is having one of those days, and for once I have a chance to maybe put something on the air that wasn't supposed to ever see daylight, something that was written for exactly this kind of hurt. I'm not trying to be a hero. I don't want Larkspur to go through this alone and unseen. He stopped, breathing hard. On the other end, Whitcomb was quiet for a moment. That's what I told him you'd say, Whitcomb said softly. That it wasn't about a stunt, it was about witness. Witness, Walter repeated. The word felt, right? So here's where we are, Whitcomb continued. George is wary. He doesn't like being used as a prop in corporate battles. He's not interested in headlines that say country star takes on big business. He's spent his whole career trying to keep politics out of his music as much as he can. I'm not trying to drag him into a fight, Walter said quickly. I know, Whitcomb said, but he also knows something about towns like Larkspur, and about songs that get locked away because they say too much that people in power don't want said. So he made a proposal. Walter realized he was holding his breath. He'll do it, Whitcomb said. He'll sing quiet on Mill Street, once live on your show. No tapes sent out in advance. No leaks, no recording pulled from the vault. He wants it to be a performance for that town in that moment. Walter's hand tightened so much on the phone, his knuckles ached. He'll come here? He asked, barely trusting the words. Yes, Whitcomb said. He wants to be in the room. He doesn't want this to be some sterile patch-in over a satellite connection. He wants to see the town he's singing to. Mr. Whitcomb, he said, his voice shaking, I don't know how to... Don't thank me, Whitcomb replied. I didn't write that song, and I'm not the one getting on a plane. Just make sure you understand what this means. There will be attention, probably more than your station's ever had. Good attention, bad attention. Vantage will not love that this is happening on their airwaves. I already assume that, Walter said. George has one condition, Whitcomb continued. He doesn't want this turned into a press circus before it happens. No announcements, no posters, no social media campaigns. You tell whoever you need to tell to make it logistically possible. Beyond that, you let it be what it's meant to be, a moment that belongs first to Larkspur, and only second to the wider world that might hear about it later. We can do that, Walter said immediately. I can do that. I'll send you his team's travel details, Whitcomb said. He's free next Saturday. You do your last Heartland hour that morning, correct? Yes, Walter said. Then that's where he wants to be. Walter let the words sink in. George Strait. In his little studio. On the final Heartland hour. Singing a song that had been locked away almost as long as Walter had been on the air. It felt too big and exactly right at the same time. One more thing, Whitcomb added. George isn't going there to take sides in your battle with Vantage. He's going there for the people whose lives are being upended. If you use his presence as a cudgel against the company, he'll feel used. We clear? We're clear, Walter said. This isn't about embarrassing Vantage. It's about telling the truth about what's happening here. If they feel embarrassed by that, that's on them. Whitcomb let out a small, humorless chuckle. You sound like someone who's been doing this for a while. Too long some days, Walter said. All right then, Whitcomb replied. We'll be in touch with the specifics. And Walter? Yeah? Songs wait a long time for the right ears, Whitcomb said. I hope your town's ready. I think they are, Walter answered. Even if they don't know it yet, they hung up. Walter sat in the quiet kitchen, phone in his hand, the late afternoon light slanting through the small window over the sink. For the first time since Ellsworth's email and Harold's memo, the heaviness in his chest shifted. It didn't lift. The plant was still closing. His show was still being canceled, but something else had entered the equation. Possibility. Witness. A song nobody wanted to release was about to find its way into a town nobody at corporate wanted to think about for more than the length of a quarterly report. And Walter Callahan, an aging DJ in a small Texas station, was right in the middle of it. By the time Saturday rolled around, Larkspur had shifted into a strange mix of routine and expectancy, like a town holding its breath but still showing up for work. The fabrication plant was still operating, machines still clanging, parts still moving down conveyor belts. The diner, still filled with the usual morning crowd. Farmers, truckers, retirees with nowhere else to be. The grocery store still ran its buy one get one cereal sale. Yet under all of it, there was a low hum of something different. No one had officially announced anything special was happening at WKLR. There were no flyers, no social posts from the station. But people in small towns didn't need press releases. They needed only glances, tone shifts, odd little details. On Thursday, someone saw Walter in the parking lot talking on his cell phone, eyes bright in a way they hadn't been in weeks. On Friday, Carla at the front desk took an unusual number of calls from industry people with Tennessee area codes. That same day, the station's ancient cleaning contractor, Mrs. Henley, who'd been vacuuming the halls since the late 90s, watched as Walter carefully cleared clutter from the studio, stacking old CDs, straightening up tangled cables, even wiping dust off the framed photos. "You expecting company?" she'd asked, one eyebrow raised. "Something like that," Walter had replied. By Friday evening, a rumor had taken shape with no clear source. Something big is happening on the last Heartland hour. People didn't know what. A special guest? A big announcement? A protest? But they knew Walter, and they knew his show, and they knew when he was walking around with that particular combination of burden and purpose. "Whatever it is," Earlene told her husband over dinner, "I'm tuning in, and I'm not leaving the radio for that whole hour." At WKLR, Saturday started earlier than usual. Walter woke before his alarm. The sky outside the bedroom window was still a dark, soft blue, the faintest hint of dawn just beginning to press along the horizon. He lay there for a moment, listening to the quiet of the house. Nancy turned over, opening her eyes partway. "What time is it?" she murmured. "Too early," he said, "but I need to head in." She blinked, fully awake, then reached for his hand. "You ready?" she asked. "No," he said honestly, "but I'm going anyway." She smiled faintly. That's usually when the important things happen. He squeezed her hand, then got up and dressed in the half-light jeans, boots, the old WKER embroidered shirt he'd worn for more anniversary broadcasts than he could count. He hesitated, then grabbed his brown leather jacket from the closet, the same one he'd worn that first year behind the mic. On his way out, he paused in the doorway. "Nancy," he said. She asked, pulling the comforter around herself. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For pushing me," he said. "To tell Diane. To not just drift through this like it was happening to someone else." She gave him a long look, warm and tired and proud all at once. "Go do what you were put here to do, Walter," she said, "and try not to get sued." He laughed quietly, then headed downstairs. The drive to the station took 12 minutes. He knew every crack in the road, every mailbox, every sagging fence post along the way. The sky lightened as he drove, streaks of pink and pale gold spilling over the flat fields. As he passed the fabrication plant, he saw trucks lined up, exhaust steaming in the cool morning air. A few workers were outside, smoking before their shift, shoulders hunched against the breeze. Some of them raised hands when they saw his truck. He honked, gave a small wave back. He wondered how many of them would have the show on in their cars. In the break room, in their earbuds tucked under mandatory safety gear. When he turned into WKLR's cracked parking lot, he saw Diane's car already there. the old Chevy parked in the corner spot she always took when she came by, before or after work. His chest tightened, but in a different way than it had a week ago. Less fear, more fragile hope. Inside, the station hummed with the familiar sounds, the faint whine of the air conditioner trying its best, the soft thump of bass lines leaking from the studio monitors, the clack of Carla's keyboard at the front desk. Carla looked up as he walked in. "There he is," she said. "Our man of the hour." "More like man of the last hour," Walter said dryly. "Don't undersell it," she replied. "You've got flowers." He blinked. "What?" She jerked her chin toward the corner of the reception area. A large bouquet sat on a side table. Sunflowers, wildflowers, and a few roses stuck in like an afterthought. There was a handwritten card sticking out of it. Walter walked over and picked up the envelope. On the front, in neat, looping cursive, "To Walter and the Heartland Hour." He opened it. Inside, on plain stationery, was a short note. "Thank you for 30 years of keeping our stories on the air. No matter what they put on after today, we'll remember who was there when it mattered. From a grateful listener, and half the town." Walter swallowed hard. Carla watched him from the desk, her eyes softer than her usual cheer. "That came in at 6, she said. "Guy from the florist dropped it off." "Wouldn't say who ordered it." "Probably because they all did," Walter said. He set the card back down carefully like it was fragile. "Is he here yet?" Carla asked in a lower voice. "No," Walter said. "Not yet. They land in about an hour." "You nervous?" she asked. He considered lying. "Yeah," he said. She nodded, as if that were the most natural thing in the world. "Good," she said. "If you weren't, I'd be worried you were a robot." In the studio, Diane sat in his usual second chair, feet up on the small equipment rack, staring at the wall of CDs and vinyl sleeves. Her hair was pulled back into a messy knot. She wore a plain black t-shirt and jeans. No work uniform today. "You're early," Walter said, stepping inside. "So are you," she replied. "Guess we both had trouble sleeping." He closed the door behind him. The studio felt smaller than usual, packed with more equipment than it was built for. Microphones, stands, monitors. Still, it was his favorite room in the world. Diane dropped her feet to the floor and turned her chair to face him fully. "You sure this is going to happen?" she asked. "That he's really coming?" "I talked to his manager yesterday," Walter said. "Plane's on schedule. They'll drive straight from the small regional airport into town. Should be here around 6:45. She shook her head slowly, still trying to wrap her mind around it. "I grew up listening to you play his songs," she said. "Never thought I'd see him sit in this room." Walter smiled. "I never thought I'd see half the things I've seen in this room." Her gaze searched his face for a moment. "You doing okay?" she asked. It was the same question she'd asked earlier in the week in a very different tone. This time there was less accusation, more cautious concern. "I'm, carrying a lot," he said. "But I think I know what I need to do now." "Good," she said. "Because whether you like it or not, you've become sort of, I don't know, the town's narrator." He snorted. "Narrators don't control what happens, they just describe it. Sometimes that's the only part we have control over," she said. He stared at her, struck again by how much wiser she was than he'd given her room to be when she was younger. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "For what?" she asked. "For taking this long to understand how much my choices hurt you," he said. "For thinking that being there for everyone else on the radio made up for not being there at your school plays." She looked at him for a long moment, then gave a small nod. "Apology accepted," she said, "with the condition that you don't waste today beating yourself up. Use it. Make it count." He nodded back, throat tight. At 6:20 a.m., Walter's phone buzzed. He checked the caller ID. Tennessee number. He answered. "This is Gerald," came the familiar voice. "We're about 15 minutes out. Hit a couple of slow trucks on the highway, but we're moving." "You find the place okay?" Walter asked. "It's not hard to find the one radio station in town." Gerald replied. Though if that sign out front leans any further left, it's going to fall over. Walter laughed. We've been meaning to fix that. We'll be there soon, Gerald said. He's in good spirits, a little quieter than usual. This means something to him. It means everything to us, Walter said. After they hung up, Walter looked at the clock. 6:23 a.m. He took a deep breath and turned to Diane. They're close, he said. Okay, she replied, standing. I'll go wait by the door. Make sure Carla doesn't faint. Out in the parking lot, the town had begun to gather. It had started with a handful of people, a couple of plant workers who weren't on shift yet, 3 retirees who always listened to the show from their trucks anyway. Then someone texted a cousin. Someone else posted, vaguely, y'all might want to swing by WKLR this morning, just saying. By 6:30 a.m., there were maybe 30 people out there, huddled in small clusters, sipping gas station coffee from paper cups, breath faintly visible in the cool morning air. By 6:40, there were closer to 70. Nobody had said George Strait out loud, not really. It was like the town collectively understood that if you named it too directly, you might scare it away like a skittish animal. But the energy in the lot was undeniable, leaning on truck beds, crossing arms against the chill, shifting from foot to foot, every pair of eyes flicking to the road whenever headlights appeared. At 6:47, a black SUV turned off the highway and into the station lot. For a half second, people just looked. Then the driver's door opened and a man stepped out, jeans, boots, a white button-up shirt, and that unmistakable hat. He looked exactly like the album covers, only with more lines marking his cheeks and the corner of his eyes. The kind of lines you got from living exactly the kind of life you sang about. The crowd seemed to collectively forget how to breathe. Someone whispered, "Oh my God," but it came out more like a prayer than an exclamation. George Strait glanced around, taking in the people, the building, the crooked sign. Then he smiled, small, genuine, and tipped the brim of his hat. "Morning," he said. It wasn't shouted. It didn't need to be. The word rolled over the lot like it had its own volume knob. Diane stood just inside the glass front door with Carla, watching. Carla grabbed her arm. I know," Diane said, voice barely above a whisper. Walter stepped into the reception area just as the front door opened. Gerald came in first, suit jacket over jeans, sharp eyes that had clearly scanned 10,000 rooms like this one. Then George walked in, guitar case in hand, moving with the unhurried ease of someone who had long ago stopped needing to impress anyone by rushing. "Walter Callahan," George said, extending his hand. Walter took it, feeling a surreal double exposure in his mind. George Strait the icon, and George Strait the man standing in his hometown station, his handshake warm and firm. "George," Walter said, "thank you for coming. I still don't quite believe you're actually here." "Well, I am," George replied with a small laugh. "Heard this town needed a sad song more than most this week." "That's one way to put it," Walter said. George looked past him at Diane and Carla. "This your daughter?" he asked, nodding toward Diane. "Yeah," Walter said. "This is Diane. She works at the plant." Diane swallowed and stepped forward, suddenly feeling like she was 12 again, meeting someone famous for the first time. "Nice to meet you, sir," she said, offering her hand. "George," he corrected gently, shaking it. "Heard you've been through the ringer lately." She gave a small, startled smile. "You could say that. Then this one's for you as much as anyone," he said. Diane had to blink twice to keep her composure. In the corner of the reception area, Richard Ellsworth stood with a tight smile, arms crossed. He hadn't been told who the special guest was. He'd only found out 30 minutes ago, when Carla, pale but defiant, had buzzed his office and said, "You might want to come out here, boss." Now he watched Walter and George standing together, and he saw not just a country star, but a media event forming without his fingerprints on it. He stepped forward as they started to move toward the studio. "Mr. Strait," Ellsworth said, voice smooth. "Welcome. We are honored to have you here at WKLR." George turned to him, polite but distant. "Thank you," he said. "Glad to be here." I wish I'd known sooner, Ellsworth said. We could have coordinated a promotional campaign, maximized reach. Gerald and I thought keeping this one quiet was best. George interrupted gently. This isn't a tour stop, it's a visit. Ellsworth's smile tightened an almost imperceptible notch. Of course, he said. We just have some, Walter, George said, turning back to him. You mind if we get in there? I like to sit with the room a minute before the mic goes on. Absolutely, Walter said. This way. As they headed down the hall, Ellsworth fell into step beside Walter. A word? He murmured. Walter slowed just enough to hear him. What do you think you're doing? Ellsworth asked under his breath, the veneer slipping just a little. What does it look like? Walter said quietly. We're doing the show. You brought in George Strait without clearing it with me. I told you I was planning something special, Walter replied. You never asked who. This changes the scale completely, Ellsworth hissed. There are legal implications, insurance, brand alignment issues. George's team has their own insurance, Walter said. As for brand alignment, I'd say one of the most respected names in country music sitting in our studio on a Saturday morning is pretty on brand for a country station in Texas. Ellsworth glared at him for half a beat, then forced his face back into something neutral as they reached the studio door. We'll talk after, he said tightly. If you want, Walter said. Right now we've got a show to do. Inside the studio, the atmosphere shifted as soon as George sat down. He put his guitar case on the floor, opened it, and lifted out a familiar, well-worn instrument, the wood polished by thousands of hours of use. He tuned by ear, barely glancing at the headstock, fingers moving by habit. Walter checked levels on the board, his hands automatically adjusting sliders and knobs even as part of his mind stood off to the side, watching this scene like it belonged in someone else's life. Diane stood near the back wall, trying to stay out of the way while taking in every detail. The red-on air light was still off. The room felt almost church quiet. You nervous? George asked casually, plucking a string and twisting a peg. About as much as the first time I cracked this mic, Walter admitted. That's good, George said. Means it still matters. You ever stop being nervous? Diane blurted, then immediately looked like she wanted to sink into the floor. George glanced at her with a small smile. Not really, he said. You just get used to playing through it. He nodded toward the microphone. This thing's like a mirror, he added. It doesn't lie. Picks up every crack, every hesitation. People don't always know what they're hearing, but they feel it. Walter thought about how many mornings he'd sat in this chair, feeling that invisible mirror turned on him. What about the song? Walter asked quietly. You haven't done it in decades. George's fingers paused for a second on the strings. I've never done it in public, he corrected. Only in that studio, that one day. It's been living in my head ever since. I pull it out sometimes when I'm alone, see if it still fits. And does it? Walter asked. George met his eyes. Today it does, he said. At 6:59 a.m., with seconds before the top of the hour, Walter put on his headphones. Through the soundproof glass, he could see people pressed up against the lobby windows, faces expectant. Even through the walls, he could feel the murmur of the crowd outside. He glanced at Diane. She gave him a small nod. He looked at George. The singer's hands rested lightly on his guitar. His face was calm, but there was something in his eyes, a mix of sorrow and steel. Walter took a breath. The red light flicked on. Good morning, Larkspur, he said, voice filling the headphones. Smooth and steady, the product of 30 years' practice and 30 days of turmoil. This is Walter Callahan, and today, this is the last morning we'll open the Heartland Hour together. He let that sit, the words finally said aloud where they couldn't be taken back. For 30 years, he continued, this hour has been about you, the folks who wake up before the sun to get out to the fields, or head into the plant, or fire up the rigs. The moms packing lunches, the grandparents brewing coffee, the kids in pickup trucks on their way to school, wondering why anyone listens to some old guy telling stories with their songs. A soft, distant chuckle from Diane reached him through the glass. even if the audience couldn't hear it. "I've thought a lot this week," he went on, "about what this last hour should be. We could spend it playing old favorites and telling fun stories. We could pretend everything's just another morning." He paused, feeling his throat tighten. "But it's not just another morning," he said quietly. "Our town is about to go through something hard. Maybe the hardest thing since the gin closed. In 8 weeks, the Larkspur fabrication plant will shut its doors, and 312 of our neighbors will be out of work. Many of you listening right now are among them." In the plant's break room, a half-dozen workers looked up from their coffee toward the speaker in the corner. On the factory floor, where small radios sat tucked on shelves near machines, heads turned. On County Road 7, in an old farmhouse kitchen, Erlene put her hand over her mouth. "In times like this," Walter said, "we reach for songs, not because they fix anything, but because they tell us we're not alone. They say this has happened before, and someone saw it, and they cared enough to write it down." He looked at George. "Years ago," he continued, "a song was written and recorded in Nashville that told a story a lot like what Larkspur is living through right now. That song never saw the light of day. Men in suits decided it was too sad, too real, not commercial enough." He smiled faintly at the absurdity of it. "But this morning," he said, "that song is about to be heard, for the first time in public, right here, in the town. It might as well have been written for." He took a breath. "It's an honor," he said, "to welcome to this little studio a man whose music has ridden in more of your trucks than mine ever did. He came here today not for headlines, not for hype. George," he said, "thank you for being here. Thank you for having me." George's voice came through, low and warm, that familiar drawl carrying decades of songs behind it. "Morning, Larkspur." If the crowd outside could have heard him directly, there would have been a roar. As it was, they pressed closer to the glass, phones raised, catching whatever they could. "This song's called Quiet on Mill Street," George said. "It was written a long time ago, for a town a lot like yours. The folks in charge back then thought maybe it cut a little too close to home. But some truths, they don't disappear just because you put them on a shelf." He adjusted the guitar in his lap. "This one's for anyone who's ever stood outside a plant, or a mill, or a gin, and realized the future they thought they had just got boarded up," he said. "And it's especially for the folks in Larkspur facing that feeling right now." He began to play. The first notes were simple, a picked pattern that settled over the airwaves like dust in a sunbeam. No flashy runs, no big intro, just a melody that felt like it had been sitting in someone's chest for years, waiting. The first verse came out soft but sure. A father standing by the rusted gate, lunch pail in his hand. "But he's 2 hours late. There's a paper on the door where the whistle used to blow saying thank you for your service. Now it's time to go." Walter felt the words hit like a punch. He saw his own father at the gin, lunch pail limp at his side. Second verse. "There's a boy in his Sunday shirt, sleeves rolled tight, asking why Mama's crying on a Tuesday night. She just points to the window where the smokestacks used to be, says they took your daddies tomorrow when they crossed the sea." Diane's hand flew to her mouth. Tears blurred her vision. She thought of kids in Larkspur right now who would ask those questions in a few weeks. The chorus rose, not loud, but deep. "Now it's quiet on Mill Street, no engines, no steam, just a ghost in the factory where we once chased a dream. They say it's just business somewhere far down the line. But they don't hear the silence when you're standing in the unemployment line outside the studio." People began to cry openly. A man who'd worked 32 years at the plant wiped his face with the back of his hand, unashamed. A teenage boy in a hoodie standing near his mother looked stunned, as if realizing maybe for the first time what was really happening to their town. Inside, even Gerald, long used to hearing George sing in every possible context, stood with his arms folded and his eyes suspiciously bright. The second verse dipped into specifics that felt eerily parallel to Larkspur. "There's a for sale sign swinging on every third lawn. and the diner by the tracks only makes it till dawn. Then the waitress wipes the counter, locks the door with a sigh, says, "They bought us for $1, sold us for a lie." Walter flashed to Gloria at the diner, who had served him coffee every morning this week, her smile a little thinner than usual. The bridge came like a quiet accusation and a mournful observation at once. In some high-rise office with a panoramic view, they move us like numbers, not like people that they knew, but there's names carved in tables, and years on the wall. You can't put a price tag on losing it all. George's voice didn't crack, but it roughened slightly, not the performative rasp of a singer showing off, but the sound of someone who still believed, after all this time, that songs like this mattered. By the final chorus, it felt like the whole town was holding on to each line like a rope. "So it's quiet on Mill Street, you can hear every tear. From a place on the map they forget is still here. They call it transition, we just call it goodbye to the smoke, to the steel, to the American sky." The last chord hung in the air longer than usual, vibrating in the space between strings and silence. George let it ring, then muted it gently with his palm. Inside the studio, no one spoke for a moment. On the airwaves, that silence traveled out too, a rare, raw few seconds of nothing that said more than any jingle could. Walter swallowed, his own eyes burning. He'd heard thousands of songs in this studio. He knew in his bones that this one was different. He leaned toward the mic. "That," he said quietly, "was quiet on Mill Street." He cleared his throat, steadying his voice. "You just heard that song for the first time," he said, "but it's been sitting in a vault in Nashville for nearly 40 years. Men at a table said it was too heavy, too sad, not what radio wanted. They put it away and hoped nobody would ask about it again." He looked at George, who nodded once, giving him permission without words to keep going. "But what you just felt," Walter continued, "is exactly why it was written. For the people who stand in parking lots, like the one outside our own plant right now, clutching memos that talk about market adjustments while trying to figure out how to pay for braces and mortgages." He took a breath. "Folks," he said, "I'm not going to pretend this song fixes anything. It doesn't reopen the plant. It doesn't magically give anyone a job. But it does something that I think matters just as much in its own way. It testifies. It puts on record, in a voice bigger than mine, that what's happening to towns like Larkspur isn't invisible." He could almost feel Ellsworth stiffening in the hallway outside the control room. "Somewhere there are spreadsheets and charts where this closure looks like a smart decision," Walter said. "Where 312 jobs are a cost line, not 312 stories. Those charts won't mention the smell of this town at dawn, or the sound of shift change traffic, or the way kids grow up knowing the rhythm of that plant's whistle, even if they'd never set foot inside." He leaned in, voice lower, more intimate. "But this show," he said, "has always been about the parts the charts don't show." He glanced at the clock. The hour was halfway gone. "I'm not supposed to talk about certain things on this air," he said. "I've been told very clearly where the lines are. And I'm not going to stand here and make accusations I can't substantiate in a court of law." He paused. "But I am going to say this," he went on. "The same kinds of folks who decided this song should sit in a vault for 40 years because it told too much truth are the same kinds of folks who decide that a town like Larkspur is a number to move from one column to another." He let that settle. "And I think," he said, "it matters that on this last Heartland hour, we say out loud that we see what's happening, that we record it, that we don't just accept the official language of transition and efficiency as the only story being told." He turned to George again. "George, you didn't have to come here," he said. "You didn't have to open that vault. Why did you?" George cleared his throat, adjusting the mic. "I grew up not too far from towns like this," he said. "Played in a lot of them, slept on a lot of couches. I've seen what happens when the main employer in a place goes dark. Folks stand around asking, does anybody even know? Does anybody up there care?" He rested his hands on the guitar neck. "When we cut this song," he said, "I was thinking about a town I'd visited that felt just like that. Label didn't want it. That's their right. They were thinking about radio. I was thinking about people. Sometimes those two don't line up. A ghost of a smile crossed his face. But I told Gerald back then, he continued, if there ever was a day when a town like that needed the song more than I needed it on a record, we'd find a way. Looks like today's one of those days. In homes and trucks and break rooms across Larkspur, people sat a little straighter, as if someone had just said their name out loud. Outside the studio, Ellsworth paced in the hallway like a caged animal. From where he stood, he could hear the tone of Walter's voice, the cadence, the unmistakable edge of something approaching the line he'd drawn in that office days ago. We can't cut the feed now, a junior engineer, nervous and wide-eyed, whispered. The whole town's listening. Half of them are in the parking lot. And it's George Strait. I'm not saying cut it, Ellsworth hissed back. I'm saying we document everything he says and does right now. He pinched the bridge of his nose. This was spiraling beyond anything Vantage had prepared him for. A beloved local host making veiled but pointed comments about corporate decisions, backed by a country legend singing a long-buried ballad about plant closures, while the company that owned the station had financial overlap with the very plant closing down. It was a PR nightmare waiting to happen. And yet, part of him, the small, still human part, not entirely flattened by spreadsheets and media plans, felt something like begrudging respect. They were watching a man use his last hour of influence not to save himself, but to give his town something true. Back in the studio, the hour rolled forward. Walter took a few calls, carefully selected, short but powerful. A man named Jerome, voice rough with emotion, said, I worked 31 years at that plant. Thought I'd retire there. It felt like somebody had been eavesdropping on my life. A woman named Kelsey, speaking from her parked car, said, my husband's already looking for jobs 2 towns over. We don't know if we'll have to move, but hearing that, I don't know. I just needed to cry with someone besides my steering wheel. Each time, Walter kept his responses simple. He didn't use their pain as a springboard into a rant. He let their words sit, honored, and then folded the moment back into the music. Near the end of the hour, he turned his mic down for a moment and looked at Diane. You okay? He mouthed. She wiped her cheeks, nodded firmly. You? She mouthed back. He gave a small shrug and half smile that said, getting there. He turned his mic on again. We're almost out of time, he said. I'll be honest with you, I don't know what happens after this. I don't know what the station's new shows will sound like. I don't know what jobs will open up in Larkspur before the plant closes, or what programs will really materialize to help the folks getting displaced. He exhaled slowly. But I do know this, he said. We told the truth this morning. We didn't hide from it. We didn't dress it up. We put a song on the air that was supposed to stay buried because it said too much about what really happens to towns like ours. We heard it. We felt it. And nobody can take that back now. He reached for the fader that controlled his microphone. For 30 years, he said, you've let me into your homes and trucks and kitchens. You've trusted me with your stories. It has been the honor of my life to hold them for a little while and send them back to you with a soundtrack. His voice dipped, full of love and regret and gratitude all at once. This is Walter Callahan, he said, and for the last time on WKLR, this has been the Heartland Hour, coming to you from Larkspur, Texas, where the stories are real, the music is honest, and even if they try to turn down the volume on towns like ours, we're not going quietly. He glanced at George. You want to take us out? He asked. George nodded, lifted his guitar, and eased into one more song. An older, familiar one this time, about holding on when everything's falling apart. The kind of song everyone knew by heart, so that in trucks and kitchens and parking lots, people sang along quietly, voices cracking, some of them holding hands with whoever was close. As the last notes faded, Walter brought the board's main fader down, ending the broadcast. The red on-air light blinked off. For a second, no one moved. Then George set his guitar down and looked at Walter. "You did right," he said simply. Walter let out a breath he'd been holding for what felt like weeks. "Did it help?" he asked, not entirely sure who he was asking, George, Diane, the town, himself. Diane stepped closer, eyes red but steady. "It didn't fix anything," she said. "But now it feels like what's happening to us is part of a bigger story, not just some private shame. That matters." He nodded. Out in the parking lot, people slowly began to disperse, some heading home, some to work, some just standing still for a few more minutes, reluctant to move too quickly after what they'd just heard. Inside, beyond the glass, beyond the worn foam and battered boards, something had shifted. The plant was still closing. The jobs were still going. The show was still canceled. But Larkspur was no longer just a number on a quarterly report. It was a town that had been seen, heard, and sung for, live on the air, by a voice that had once been kept from doing exactly that, and that changed the way people held themselves when they stepped back into the hard days that waited. By Sunday afternoon, Larkspur's moment had already started to ripple far beyond the flat Texas horizon. At first it was small, a grainy clip filmed through WKLR's lobby window, posted by a teenager on social media. You could barely see George A's face through the glass. The reflection of the crowd outside ghosted over everything. But the audio was clear enough, the chorus of Quiet on Mill Street pouring out of the station's old speakers, raw and unpolished. The caption read, "They tried to shut down our town and our radio show." George Strait showed up and sang the song they didn't want anyone to hear. By evening, the clip had been shared a few hundred times within the region. By Monday morning, it had been shared tens of thousands of times across the country. At WKLR, the air felt charged. Walter walked into the station at 7:15 a.m. on Monday, feeling like he'd aged a year in 2 days. Carla looked up from her desk with wide eyes. "You've seen it, right?" she asked. "Seen what?" he replied, hanging his jacket. She turned her computer screen slightly so he could see. A national country music blog had posted an article. George Strait performs unreleased song about mill closure live for struggling Texas town. Below the headline was that same blurry window video, embedded with a play button and a short description. There was a quote pulled from Walter's broadcast, his line about charts that don't mention the smell of this town at dawn. "It's everywhere," Carla said. "Twitter, Facebook, even my niece in Dallas texted me asking if that was really our station." Walter stared at the screen, a strange mix of pride and dread twisting in his gut. "How's Richard?" he asked. "Been in his office since 6:30, Carla said. Door closed. Phone glued to his ear. Face like someone switched his coffee with motor oil. "Sounds about right," Walter murmured. He headed down the hall toward his old studio. Old now that the Heartland Hour slot was officially gone. The station's news syndicated morning feed was already playing on WT-109. The automation system humming along happily, indifferent to what had happened 2 days earlier. He paused by the glass and listened for a moment. A bright, polished voice from some city far away chattered about a country star's new endorsement deal. There was a canned laugh track, a segment teasing a prank call bit. It sounded fine. It also sounded like it could have been playing in any town in America. Walter turned away. He was halfway to the break room when Ellsworth's voice called from behind him. "Walter, my office, now." Ellsworth's office, once a storage room, looked more harried than usual. Papers scattered across the glass desk. A half-finished coffee going cold. 2 different news sites open on his laptop, both showing the same headline about Georgia's performance. Walter shut the door behind him. "You wanted to see me," he said. "Sit," Ellsworth replied tersely. Walter did. For a long moment, Ellsworth just looked at him like he was trying to decide which version of himself to deploy. The controlled corporate manager, or the man whose station had just become the center of a story he could neither spin nor stop. "Do you have any idea," Ellsworth began slowly, "how many calls I've fielded in the last 24 hours? More than usual," Walter said. "Funny," Ellsworth snapped. "Try corporate PR from Vantage's headquarters." Try legal counsel. Try a very agitated representative from Armitage Industrial. Not to mention 3 different regional news outlets, 2 national ones, and what I'm pretty sure was a podcast host broadcasting from his mother's basement. Walter folded his hands in his lap. "What are they saying?" he asked. "They're asking," Ellsworth said, "why one of Vantage's stations aired a segment in which its longtime host strongly implied that our parent investment firm is treating a small town like a disposable asset, while that same town's major employer, also partially owned by said firm, shuts down operations. Is that an inaccurate summary?" Walter asked calmly. "That's not the point," Ellsworth shot back. "The point is you used this platform to push a narrative that paints your employer as the villain." "I used this platform to tell the truth," Walter said. "If the truth makes someone look like a villain, maybe that's something they should reckon with." Ellsworth stared at him, jaw clenched. "You're lucky," he said finally. "Didn't feel that way last week," Walter replied. "You're lucky," Ellsworth repeated, more controlled now, "because the only thing keeping corporate from firing you on the spot is the fact that George Strait chose to stand next to you while you did it. Nobody in their right mind wants the PR headline radio company fires small-town DJ after George Strait sings for laid-off workers." Walter thought of how many headlines had probably been discussed in some conference room in Nashville or New York over the past 24 hours. "What do they want then?" he asked. "Damage control," Ellsworth said. "They want to issue a carefully worded statement about how Vantage supports local communities while making difficult but necessary decisions. They want to emphasize that your views are your own and not reflective of corporate. They want to put this to bed as quickly as possible." "And what do you want?" Walter asked. Ellsworth sagged back in his chair, the fight draining from his shoulders just a little. "I wanted a quiet transition," he admitted. "I wanted to modernize programming, hit my targets, move up the ladder. I didn't want my little Texas station turning into a case study on corporate responsibility." He rubbed his eyes. "But here we are," he added. They sat in silence for a moment. "You know what's funny?" Ellsworth said finally, surprising Walter by the flat honesty in his tone. "When I took this job, I told myself I was one of the good guys. That by keeping stations like WKLR alive, even under a big umbrella, I was preserving something. Now I'm not so sure I didn't just help build a fancier cage." Walter regarded him for a long moment. "It doesn't have to stay that way," Walter said quietly. Ellsworth gave a short, bitter laugh. "You burned every bridge you had with corporate Saturday morning," he said. "Once the smoke clears, you think they're going to let you keep a mic here?" "I don't," Walter said. "I don't expect to stay." "But maybe that's okay." Ellsworth blinked. "You're just accepting that I accepted a long time ago that this show wouldn't outlive me," Walter said. "I just didn't expect it to be someone else's decision when it ended. But Saturday wasn't about saving my job. It was about doing what this job was always supposed to do." He paused. "And if there's anything left over after that, offers, opportunities, I'll deal with them when they come." "You know the Heartland Hour is gone for good here," Ellsworth said. "That ship has sailed and sunk." "I know," Walter said. "I'm not asking you to resurrect it. I've already started thinking about what it might look like somewhere else." Ellsworth's eyebrows lifted despite himself. "Somewhere else," he repeated. "A station that doesn't answer to the same shareholders as the plant," Walter said. "And you think they'll just snap you up?" Ellsworth asked, but it lacked venom. It sounded almost curious. "I think there are still places that care more about the story than the slogan," Walter said. "Smaller outfits. Public radio, independent stations. Saturday showed me that people are hungry for what big media keeps saying is outdated." Ellsworth sat back, studying him like a puzzle he hadn't quite finished. "For what it's worth," he said after a moment, "my job is probably not as secure as it was last week either." Walter tilted his head. "You signed on to manage growth, not this. Not be the guy who let a rogue DJ and George Strait blow up a corporate narrative," Ellsworth agreed wryly. But I did sign on to manage a station. And in spite of everything, that's what you did Saturday. You managed to remind people what radio can be when it forgets to be afraid. He shook his head with a small, disbelieving smile. Damn it, he muttered. I wish I didn't respect that. Respect doesn't always have to be comfortable, Walter said. Ellsworth sighed. You're not fired, he said at last. Not today, not officially. We're reviewing the situation, which is corporate speak for waiting to see if this cools down or blows up further. What do you want me to do in the meantime? Walter asked. Your regular midday shift, Ellsworth said. No more Heartland Hour, no more solo editorials. Music, ads, weather, traffic, beat, boring. Walter considered that. I can do my job, he said. But I'm not going to pretend nothing happened. I'm not going to turn into an apologetic version of myself to make a press release cleaner. I didn't ask you to, Ellsworth said. Just don't give them an excuse to make you a scapegoat or to shut down this place entirely. He hesitated, and Walter, he added, if some independent station calls you in the next few weeks, take the meeting. Don't wait to see what we decide here. There was something almost like decency in that. I will, Walter said. He stood at the door. He paused and looked back. You ever want to step outside the script they gave you? Walter said quietly. You know where to find me. Off the clock, off the record. Ellsworth didn't answer, but his eyes flickered. A man recognizing an exit he wasn't ready to take yet, but couldn't unsee. The national impact unfolded over the next 2 weeks like a slow storm. Regional news outlets ran segments on the small Texas town where George Strait sang for laid-off workers. Some made it a feel-good story, emphasizing community, music, resilience. Others dug a little deeper, connecting the dots between Delacorte Capital's investments in both Vantage Media Group and Armitage Industrial Holdings. One national paper ran a long-form article, When the Same Money Owns Your Job and Your Radio, Larkspur, Texas, and the Cost of Consolidation. Pictures of Larkspur's Main Street appeared beside charts showing factory closures over the last 20 years. A congresswoman from the district, Patricia Hollingsworth, gave a press conference on the courthouse steps. What happened in Larkspur is not an isolated tragedy, she said. It's part of a pattern where distant financial interests make decisions that upend communities without warning or accountability. The only reason we're talking about it at all is because a local radio host refused to let his town's story be buried. And an artist with the stature of George Strait lent his voice, literally, to that truth. She announced her intent to push for hearings on corporate practices affecting small manufacturing towns. Whether those hearings would lead to real change was an open question. Walter had lived long enough not to put too much faith in speeches. But he also knew this. 6 months ago, no one in Washington could have pointed to Larkspur on a map. Now they said its name into microphones that reached beyond Texas. That meant something. The most tangible change came from Armitage itself. Facing mounting scrutiny and a wave of bad press, the company issued a new statement, this one markedly different from its first bland announcement. In light of feedback from the Larkspur community and recent attention on the impact of our decision, Armitage Industrial Holdings will be extending the operational timeline of the Larkspur fabrication facility by an additional 6 months. We are also enhancing our severance packages and committing funds to support local workforce retraining programs in partnership with the state. It was not a miracle. The plant was still closing, but it was time. 6 extra months of paychecks. 6 extra months of health insurance. 6 extra months for people to look for other work, to decide whether to move, to plan instead of just fall. At the kitchen table one night, Diane sat across from Walter and Nancy with a copy of the updated memo in her hand. So instead of 8 weeks, she said slowly, we have almost 8 months. Yeah, Walter said. It's not what you deserve, but it's more than you were going to get. She ran a finger over the printed lines. Do you think this happened because of the show? She asked, not quite looking at him. I think your town stood up, Walter said. I think they signed petitions, went to council meetings, called their reps, I think Georgia's performance gave that attention a hook. And I think the people at the top decided it was cheaper to look compassionate than to look cruel. Cheaper, she repeated, a little bitterly. But also real, Nancy said. Whatever their motives, the money's going to land in people's accounts, that matters. Diane looked at her father. Do you feel like you won? She asked. He thought about that for a long moment. I don't think this is the kind of story where anyone wins, he said. I think it's the kind where people lose less than they could have. Sometimes that's what passes for a victory. She nodded, absorbing that. But I'll tell you this, he added. If we'd stayed quiet, none of this would have been on the table. She met his eyes. Then I'm glad you didn't, she said softly. Their relationship didn't heal overnight. Real relationships never do. There were still sharp words sometimes, old resentments that flared when they were tired or scared. There were still moments when Diane pulled back, unconsciously protecting herself from expecting too much. But there were also new things. On Sundays, they started walking together on the trail that circled the small lake outside town. At first, they talked mostly about surface things, weather, sports, small gossip. Gradually, those walks shifted. What was it like when the gin closed? Diane asked one afternoon, leaves crunching under their boots. Terrifying, Walter admitted. I saw grown men cry in front of each other for the first time. A lot of folks left. Some started drinking more than they should. A few reinvented themselves completely. Your grandfather, he never quite found his footing again. Does it feel the same now? She asked. Some parts, he said. But you've got more tools than we did. Internet, retraining programs, people talking openly about mental health. Back then you were just supposed to be tough and drunk and quiet. She huffed a small laugh. Well, we're halfway there on the tough, she said. On another walk, she surprised him. Mom and I used to listen to your show together in the car, she said, on the way home from school. Even when she was mad at you, sometimes especially when she was mad at you. Walter blinked. She never told me that. Why would she? Diane said. That was our thing. She'd roll her eyes sometimes like, there he goes again, making other people's problems his nightly special. But when you'd say someone's name on the air that we knew, she'd go quiet in this respectful way. I think she was proud of you even when she couldn't stand you. He swallowed. What about you? He asked. How did you feel? Both, she said simply. I was proud, and I resented you. I didn't know you could hold those two things at once until I was older. He nodded, grateful for the privilege of hearing her say it. Offers did come. 3 weeks after the broadcast, Walter got an email from a small public radio station in Austin. They were independent, funded partly by listener donations, partly by a patchwork of grants. They reached out with cautious enthusiasm. We've followed what happened in Larkspur. If you're thinking about what's next, we'd like to talk. He drove down for a meeting on a bright Tuesday, the highway stretching ahead in a long, straight ribbon. The city felt big and loud compared to Larkspur. More traffic, more glass, more everything. The station itself, though, was small, modest. Cozy in a way WKLR had once been before the Vantage logos and the new policies. A woman named Ellen, the programming director, met him in the lobby. We're not fancy, she said, leading him past a wall of local concert posters, but we're stubborn. And we still believe radio can be about something besides selling soda and trucks. They sat in a tiny conference room with a wobbly table. She slid a sheet of paper toward him. We can't pay what a corporate network pays, she said. But we can give you something they don't always offer, editorial freedom. Within reason, obviously. We've got standards. But we're not going to tell you you can't say the word plant closure on air if it's happening 2 miles from your transmitter. He read the proposal. A weekly show, 1 hour. Statewide syndication across several affiliated stations. A new name, Texas Voices. It'd be your baby, Ellen said. Stories from all over the state. Farmers in the Panhandle. Restaurant workers in Houston. Teachers in El Paso. And, yeah, people in towns like yours when the world takes something from them. You've already done it for 30 years in one town. We're just asking you to widen the lens. He thought of the Heartland Hour sign that still hung a little crooked in the WKLR studio. He thought of his father's face the night the gin closed. He thought of quiet on Mill Street finally ringing out where it belonged. "I'll need to talk to my family," he said. "Of course," she replied. "We're not in a rush, but we'd love to have you." On the drive home, he rolled the window down and let the wind rush in, snapping at his thinning hair. The highway signs blurred by. Temple, Waco, Hillsboro. He felt something he hadn't felt in a while. Not joy, exactly. Possibility. George Strait's song did not stay confined to that one broadcast. 6 months later, an official announcement came from his camp. Quiet on Mill Street, a previously unreleased track recorded in 1988, will be released for the first time as a single. All proceeds will be donated to a new fund supporting workers displaced by plant and mill closures across rural America. The single rocketed up the country charts. DJs all over the country talked about its origin, the vault, the label's old decision, the Larkspur broadcast. People in Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania called into their own local stations saying, "That's my town, that's my story." Walter listened to it on his living room radio the night it officially dropped. Sound quality cleaner now, the decades-old mix mastered for modern ears. There was an extra verse he hadn't heard in the live performance, one they must have skipped for time that morning in Larkspur. It talked about a little girl drawing pictures of the mill for school, then crossing it out when it closed. He thought of kids in his own town, erasing their futures and redrawing them under new skies. Diane sat beside him on the couch, one foot tucked under her, listening quietly. "They added that bit," she said. "Yeah," he replied. "Guess they figured if they were finally going to let it out, they might as well let it all the way out." "It still hurts," she said. "It's supposed to," he answered. "The good ones always do." She leaned her shoulder against his. "Maybe that's why they hid it," she said. "Not because it was bad, because it did its job too well." He smiled sadly. "Yeah," he said. "Maybe." In the end, Walter left Wagar on his own terms. It didn't happen in a blaze of glory. It happened in a quiet meeting 3 months after the Strait broadcast, when Ellsworth called him in and said carefully that a mutual parting of ways might serve everyone best. "I've already accepted another offer," Walter said. "So for once, we're ahead of each other." Ellsworth blinked, then gave a small, resigned nod. "Texas Voices?" he asked. "I heard something about that in an industry email." "That's the one," Walter said. "You'll be good at it," Ellsworth said. "Annoying, but good." They shook hands. It was not friendship, but it was something less hostile than it could have been. Two men who had seen each other at less than flattering angles and still managed not to destroy the building around them. On Walter's last day at WKLR, there was no big on-air goodbye. They'd already had that once. Instead, the staff gathered in the break room with a homemade sheet cake that said "Thanks, Walt" in slightly crooked icing. Carla hugged him so hard he wheezed. The engineer, Dennis, who rarely spoke, pressed a small box into his hand. Inside was the on-air sign plate that had hung above the original studio door before they'd replaced it with a newer model. "You're taking the soul of the place with you," Dennis said simply. "Just borrowing it," Walter replied. A month later, on a warm Saturday evening in Austin, Walter sat in a different studio, newer, with better equipment, but with that same hum in the air that he'd come to recognize over a lifetime. A red light blinked on. "Good evening, Texas," he said. "My name's Walter Callahan, and this is Texas Voices, where the people on the other end of the line aren't just markets or metrics, they're our neighbors." He smiled, a little surprised at how natural it felt. "Tonight," he continued, "we're starting where my own story took a turn, in a small town called Larkspur. You might have heard of it, you might not have. Either way, there are folks there whose lives look a lot like someone you know." He leaned in. "We're going to talk about what happens after the plant closes," he said. "Not just the headlines, but the quiet months when everyone else has moved on and you're still figuring out how to pay the electric bill." He thought of Diane, now enrolled in a community college program funded by the retraining grant, studying industrial design. Of Harold, who'd taken a job at a local credit union. of Erlene and her husband, who'd started a small engine repair shop out of their garage. But first, he said, his voice softening, we're going to start with a song. One that sat in the dark for a long time, before some town finally needed it bad enough to pull it into the light. He cued the track. Out across Texas, in farmhouses and apartments and truck cabs and tiny living rooms, Quiet on Mill Street began to play again, this time not as a secret gift to a single town, but as a shared language for thousands of others who'd lived their own versions of the same story. Walter sat back, listening. He thought of all the things that hadn't been fixed. Factories would still close. Corporations would still make cold decisions. Not every town would get a visit from a country legend when it happened, but he also thought of this. A man with a guitar had walked into his little studio one morning and, with a song, acknowledged the wound of a place the world usually overlooked. A daughter had looked at her father and, over time, seen not just his failures, but his effort to make amends with the one thing he knew how to do. A town had been given the gift of knowing its story mattered enough to be sung. Some songs waited 40 years. Some truths waited just as long. And when they finally arrived, they didn't heal everything, but they changed the way people carried what hurt. Sometimes Walter had come to realize that was the most honest kind of happy ending anyone could ask for.